Let's have some fun and look at some trade scenarios involving Paul George. So number one, the team we're dealing with has to be desperate. But also, I'm looking at a team in Miami. I'm looking straight at you, Miami Heat, because I believe they potentially could be saying, oh, we could fix Paul George. Heat culture can do this to Paul George because they really believe in themselves. I mean, they bet on themselves getting rid of Jimmy Butler when he literally carried that roster to the NBA Finals. So they have irrational confidence. They got egos. I think that's a team that potentially could fall for the Paul George hype. Now, they just traded for Andrew Wiggins. I've seen trade scenarios that involve Wiggins for Paul George. And obviously, if you're the Sixers, you would do that any single day because Andrew Wiggins is younger, also on a cheaper deal, also less years on his contract. But personally, I just don't see the Miami Heat trading Andrew Wiggins for Paul George unless there's a first-round pick attached or more picks, unfortunately. However, I think the Sixers could get something like this done, eating the Terry Rozier contract, unfortunately, but at least it's only 2 more years compared to Paul George's 4 more years. And Duncan Robinson, I really like him. I think he could find a spot in any rotation in the NBA. He's one of the best movement shooters in the league. He would help out the Sixers offense. He would find a spot on the team. And once again, only 2 years left on that contract. And then the last guy in the trade package would be Kyle Anderson, $8.7 million. It goes up to $9 million in his last year, 3-year deal. He's not a terrible player. He just can't shoot or stretch the floor, but he is a solid playmaker and passer. But many forget the reason he got that contract is because he was very good for Minnesota when they made the Western Conference Finals. In the regular season, he was a key piece for them off the bench. He had some solid moments in the playoffs versus Denver off the bench. Nothing special in the playoffs, but he's definitely capable of being a solid rotational piece, switchable defender, can do things in a short roll, and kind of can do things on the ball every once in a while for himself and others. But honestly, going over this, it shows the sad situation of any Paul George deal moving forward. If the Sixers want to get anything back in return, they're going to have to add draft compensation. They're going to have to add a young player like Jared McCain or something like that if they want to get any value back. Or you're going to have to take what I just put on the screen, and I'm sure I'm already seeing comments, oh, that's terrible. I'd rather just bite the bullet and play Paul George. It sounds like Tobias Harris all over again. You guys don't want to do any trades with Tobias Harris. That's why I don't see a Paul George deal getting done, because Daryl Morey is too stubborn to make a deal where he admits that he was wrong for signing Paul George. It reminds me of the Zach LaVine situation. And keep in mind, LaVine is making less money. He has less years on his deal. That contract is more enticing at this point than Paul George's long-term contract. And guess what the Bulls got back? And Zach LaVine, before he got traded, he was cooking 24 points per game with the Bulls, 51% from the field, 44.6% from three. I mean, he was having a great season, and the Bulls took on Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 first-round pick via the Spurs. So they got their first-round pick back. They got nothing special. And Zach LaVine at this point, based on age and also his play this year, he should realistically have more value than Paul George moving forward. So before we go on to the next trade scenario, I just want to pose a question to you guys. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Do you think it's more worth it hoping to get the best out of Paul George? Maybe a new coach helps get the better out of him. Maybe he was just unhealthy this year. I don't know. Because looking at the trade scenario I just put out, that's probably going to be the reality of a Paul George trade. So you're really just going to be banking on it being a Nick Batum situation and hoping one of those role players really, really works out. But also there's potential that all three of those role players don't fit your system. So is banking on Paul George reviving himself a better option? I'm kind of like 50-50, to be honest. I see both sides. But I will say, if Paul George is coming back, I can't have Nick Nurse back. I can't have Nick Nurse, Joel Embiid, and Paul George back. Like, someone has to go. Something has to change after this despicable season. So my next trade is from an outside source, the RightWaySportsNetwork.net by RK. He had an article that is titled, Paul George Traded to the Chicago Bulls. And I was like, I mean, that could potentially be a team that is like, oh, maybe we can fix Paul George because we have to make the playoffs. All we care about is making the playoffs and not really having a chance. Like, that seems to be their idea of success with their ownership and general manager group. And also, they might be high off the Josh Giddey success because they took a chance on Josh Giddey, and it seems to be working out, even though I don't think they should pay him too much in the offseason because he's probably going to come back down to earth. He's just having a great end of the season or whatever. But I digress. Potential trade idea, he stated, Paul George, Ricky Council, 2029 first-round pick, Clippers, and the Sixers receive Patrick Williams, Zach Collins, and Kevin Huerter. It's also interesting to see from an outside source that they have the Sixers including a first-round pick for a bunch of role players. And for a guy, like the sweetener in the deal is Patrick Williams, he's been a complete bust for the Chicago Bulls. But maybe the Sixers can get the most out of him. So I took his idea and did another Chicago Bulls trade package. I took back Lonzo Ball. I think that would be a really good get back for Paul George. It's risky. I think the Bulls would be willing to do it because it's kind of like a risk both ways. Lonzo Ball might get injured, but he also is a perfect fit next to Maxey and Jared McCain, a big guard who can run the offense and also play defense. You get back Kevin Huerter, good shooter, pretty average player. Javon Carter, well, average player except Game 7 versus the Sixers. And then Javon Carter as well, just to make the money work and the cap situation work and all that good stuff. But I think this would be a fun deal. I like it more than the Miami Heat deal. And I think the Bulls are a good team to think about taking a risk on Paul George and also low-key taking a risk on Joel Embiid. And think about it, it's a team that always wants to be competing for the playoffs. And I think the young core that they have now actually seems pretty good together. They're putting on a very good end to the season, and it seems like their future is heading in the right direction. So I don't think they're going to be tanking ever moving forward. And also, they had zero interest in tanking for Cooper Flagg. They aren't going to attract any crazy free agent, so the only way to acquire a superstar level talent would be trading for one. Now, Giannis seems like he's probably gonna become available in like the next 3 years or so, but honestly, the deal, the trade package that the Bulls have to offer isn't very good. Like, they're not going to be getting a crazy ascending star like Giannis. They're going to have to take a risk on an Embiid. They have contracts that can easily match his contract, like Patrick Williams, Kevin Huerter, and then you slide in Vucevic, and you're right there, you're matching that big Embiid contract. So turning those three players into an Embiid talent, banking on his health, could be very worth it for them. If I were in their shoes, I would take the risk because it seems like they want to win. They don't want to tank, so why not try it?